Month 4 of the global pandemic, and the world is starting to realize a new normal awaits us. As countries begin to consider easing restrictions of business operations and social distancing, many are turning to technology to help provide a rise of second wave infections. Singapore and Australia, among others, have introduced new contact tracing apps to ensure rapid tracking of any new infections. A global workforce has begun working from home, placing renewed emphasis on telecommunications infrastructure and technology platforms to reliably keep the world working and learning as the virus plays out. Joining me to discuss this is Owen Prime, CTO of Australian success story Noggin, whose software is now in government agencies and organizations across Australia and America, enabling responses to COVID-19 and the move to the new normal.
You're listening to Smarter Cities, discussions on urban life and how it's changing around us, with Jason D'Souza.
Owen Prime, welcome to Smarter Cities.
Thanks, Jason. Pleasure to be here.
Great to see you in this socially distant way. It seems to be the new norm these days. Everything seems to be now on video conference, and I had a fascinating conversation this morning about how long it will take to get back to normal. And it dawned on me today that actually perhaps there is not going to be a new normal. We had a conversation about queuing at lift wells in office buildings and what social distance in the world of hot desking means, and how do you work if you're in an A and B team scenario and you're at the office but somebody else you're working with is on video conference and somehow you're meant to not disturb others around you. It's a fascinating world we're now moving to. What are your initial thoughts on where we are now? And first of all, how are you and your family and your staff? Are you all well and safe?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I mean, I guess we're a bit of ahead of everything at Noggin. We kind of saw it coming a bit earlier, and so we actually started moving everybody working from home around the globe. Our offices in the US and in Europe as well. We moved everybody to work from home about 2 or 3 weeks before most did, actually. So we kind of get a bit ahead of it. Everyone was able to get their monitors and get desks and those sorts of things before the rush actually happened.
There was a run on monitors, right? And desks.
There was, yeah. It was kind of
people were worried about toilet paper, but actually no, it was monitors and desks.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And even things like cables and those sorts of things were difficult as well, and a rush for internet access and a lot of that looked like surveying the staff to see what capabilities they already had at home and that type of thing. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey. It feels very isolated sitting in a room all day on video chats with staff. I do think from a family perspective, it's been interesting. I mean, having my kids around, if I go take a break, they're around and I can say hi, which is different to normal for sure. I think my wife is probably the real hero here, to be honest. Like most people's, whoever is taking care of the kids, being the heroes, and can't wait for them to go back to school, I think. So, it's been pretty challenging. Yeah.
One of the added benefits, I must say, that I agree with that. I mean, it's been nice having my daughters, for example, come in and sit in this study with me, and we'll do some of their schoolwork together, and that family time, which is not something I really get much of either, is at least didn't until the last few months, is really nice. And at a time when things are pretty difficult around the world, there are some bright sparks, and that is one of them. I must say, though, there's also the added benefit of actually seeing what they do at school through Google Classroom and the different ways of learning. And so I've been quite fascinated.
Yeah, I'd really agree with that. There are certain techniques for doing multiplication and addition and things like that, which I didn't know existed.
I'm glad you feel that way. It was me
the rote learning of just times tables and that sort of addition is very different. But look, it's fascinating to get into it and actually be a little bit more involved in their learning as well, to understand how they learn and those types of things. I think we'll be better for it in that respect, in terms of doing homework and that sort of thing.
I am worried, though, that I'm going to get shown up in a terrible way by my 6-year-old, who today asked me how many seconds there were in a year, and I went, I have no idea. That's not a piece of information I have in my head.
Depends if it's a leap year, I guess. But
Well,
yeah.
Dr. Google saved the day. But I digress, and I get ahead of myself. I wanted to just go back a bit and start with a bit about you, Owen, and how you and your colleagues started Noggin. You and I have known each other for probably a little bit too long now, far too long. We're at university together. There were great times, but unlike many of us who went on traditional career paths, and into the corporate sector or in other areas of corporate life or government life, you went and decided to start a technology company with a bunch of friends. That's it's so very 2020, isn't it? But this was back in the days when really tech was just emerging in Australia. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got into what you're doing now.
Yeah, so we started Noggin in the 2000s. I guess I am of the trio. I'm probably the technical one. I think most good startups have a mixture. I mean, you need someone who's technical. I mean, tech startups, it is someone who's technical who can actually, build the product and that type of thing. You need someone who's good at sales and the business side of things, and you need someone who's good at commercials and the compliance side of things. I mean, you need those three things, and it can't start on, can't go ahead without those three things. But I mean, for me, being on the technology side, I've always been interested in computers, and a lot of people say that, but I've always done coding. I mean, I think my father sort of sat me down when I was about 4 years old. So we're talking early 80s here. And I was in front of an Apple II Plus, gave me a book with source code in it. And he said, type that in. I went, okay, that sounds interesting. So I typed it in on my green screen computer, and it was a game. And after getting it to work, it was a game. Then I modified it and so on. And I've been coding ever since. I mean, I do it weirdly to relax. Sometimes people in my family ask me, are you working or are you playing? And I tell them both. So yeah, so we it was a sort of a fortunate meeting, I guess, as a lot of these things are, and we started doing a lot of digital marketing type work. We eventually sort of transitioned that digital marketing type work, which is websites and so on for marketing purposes, and into web-based information systems, which, I just, websites really, I mean, very sophisticated websites, but still an extension of that. And now the systems, we've even sort of gone narrower than that, information systems, to build out systems that help people, prepare, plan, respond, and recover from disruptive events, incidents, safety, emergency management, disaster management, security management, and so on. So it seems like a massive leap from websites, but a lot of the technology is the same. A lot of the problems are the same. So that's kind of how we came about, and we've been evolving ever since, the business, and we've just released our new platform last year, which is a whole new technological shift in what we do, which has been fascinating. I mean, we really the time that we jumped into this was kind of that time when desktop applications were starting to decline and getting replaced with web applications. As the web browsers got better, internet got better, people were going, you know what, we no longer want a desktop app for managing our whatever it is. We now, or our elevators or something like that. We now want our call center to be on a web-based system because we can deploy it easily. People can remote in from home. Pretty straightforward. So we kind of, I guess, rode that wave, if you want to think about it.
The virtualized world that we're kind of moving.
Exactly, yeah. And moving, yeah, and easier for people to support. So we spent a lot of our time sort of, I was going to say digitize it, but they're already digital, but move from desktop applications, these thick client desktop applications, into web-based applications.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get into that because that's a fascinating part of how we're working now. I don't think if we could do any of this if the world wasn't virtualized now, that we wouldn't be able to be having these sorts of conversations the way we are now, or working remotely in a global sense. But I don't want to get off yet your love of coding and how you got into this. What is it about this particular style of business that attracted you to it? Like, you could have really gone in any direction with your technology passion. I mean, if I remember correctly, back in the days when I had long hair and was playing in a band, you actually did my band's website and the CD cover for our first EP. those days were fun. But you could have gone in any real direction. What
Yeah.
led you from building websites to where you are now with your emergency management software and your service software?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think why we did the web side of things and not desktop applications back then, and why we saw that. A lot of it came down to being growing organic. We didn't go out and get a big bunch of capital to start our business. We started it using our own funds, which at the time, in your 20s is not a lot, right? So we flocked to open source software. And to be honest, there wasn't much around. In fact, we copped a lot of flack from people saying, oh, you're not using, the Microsoft stack and that sort of stuff. We said, no, we're not using it. We believe in it. And now, look at today, it's predominantly open source based. That's not to say it's all open source based, but a lot of, the pushing of Google and so on is all based on open source. So that was one of the things. It was, so in that sense, it was something we could do. But also, the other founders of the business as well, James, who's our CEO. I mean, he was very into advertising. He worked in advertising agencies. So that kind of gave us our start in the digital marketing. So that's why we did websites. People were willing to pay us to do this sort of stuff. And I guess when you're first starting out, you do what people are willing to pay you. As I said, we didn't go out and get capital. We didn't sit there and go, well, we've got this great idea for a product. Let's go out and get $1 million and we'll sit down and we'll conceive and go and build this product. We didn't have that luxury. We were just sort of doing stuff for money, coding for food, if you will, and having a great time doing it, and we got to set our own rules, to a certain degree, of course. Got to set our own rules, our own times. We didn't have families and things to report to. So we would work crazy hours, but we loved doing it. So it didn't really feel like work in a lot of ways. It was just felt like doing stuff. I mean, all the founders have all been a bit entrepreneurial in our makeup. So that kind of helped, I guess. No one really sort of sat there, and had a big, heavy planning, thinking about where this business is going to be in 10 years.
I mean, it is a very different approach to how you hear of startup stories today, right? There seems to be a lot of, the whole narrative around angel investing and, Series A capital, and, very few businesses I speak to these days have gone on that sort of incremental journey that you have. Is that a reflection of the times that we're in now, or is it the case that just people who are going on incremental journeys, starting themselves, they've taken a slower path, but one they're more in control of, versus the sort of more high profile, let's go and raise a bunch of capital, get a bunch of investors and board above us and go that way? Is there a case for both, or do you think the way you've done it now has kind of been replaced by this new way of dealing with capital? Because back when you were starting out, there wasn't really a lot of venture capital around, right? Not for your style of business.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think it is a bit of the sign of the times. That's not to say people didn't do it back then. I mean, I sort of see